Ambassador Francesca Tardioli, thank you very much for joining us on Europe Now.
Thank you very much, Professor Elliott, for inviting me, and thank you for the Jean Monnet Center for this opportunity.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you here. Ambassador, across Europe, 2021 has begun much the way that 2020 concluded, that is with COVID-19 to the fore. I'm wondering at the outset if I could ask you to tell me something about life on the ground in Italy in terms of the public health crisis of COVID-19, but also more generally in terms of economy and society and how it's impacting.
Yes, you're right. Unfortunately, the beginning of 2021 was less happier than expected because in Europe, and it is important also to consider that it's winter there, we do have the second wave of COVID ongoing, so there is definitely still an impact. The pandemic is still quite spread, and it implied a lot of limitations to the life of the people, be it private life, but also from an economic viewpoint and a social viewpoint. So it's still quite a difficult beginning of this new year. There is, however, the hope that the vaccination campaign could be implemented worldwide in a sustained manner quite soon. And so at least, how can we say, we can see the light at the end of the tunnel. However, there are still a lot of difficulties, I have to say, in most of the countries in Europe, including Italy, and broadly worldwide. I'm sure you are familiar with the figures. The governments, including my government, clearly are coping or trying to cope with the pandemic, first of all, because health comes first, but also with the effect of this pandemic on the economy of Italy. And this is quite a tough job. This year it's very important for my country because we are also, as you know, holding the presidency of the G20, and in that context there are a lot of emphasis and focus on health issues. First of all, I would like to remember that within the framework of the G20 presidency, Italy and the European Commission will host in Italy the Health Summit that has been just, an additional initiative to bring leaders together to further tackle those problems in a coordinated manner. But also, part of the program of the G20 is very much focused on health. And the priority in the multilateral in this multilateral forum, but also more in general within our engagement in multilateral organization, is to make sure that vaccination is provided worldwide, particularly to those countries that cannot afford themselves to produce or to buy vaccines. So Italy, as many other countries, including Australia, by the way, is a strong supporter of the Global Alliance for Vaccines, ACT accelerators, and so on. So there is a lot ongoing on this area. And economically, of course, we are now, the government is now working on the so-called recovery plan, National Plan for Recovery and Reconstruction, that is very much linked with the initiatives taken by the European Union as a response, as a global response to this pandemic, known with different names. The name I like more is Next Generation EU, and of course it is also known as EU Recovery Plan. There is a lot of emphasis on reforms and changes that are necessary in order to rebuild better after the disruption that this virus brought to our society, be it in the field of health, be it in the field of economics and so on. So this is those are the two areas where the government is busy at the moment. And when I say government, I mean obviously the government, but also the structures and the senior professionals that are doing this type of jobs. Within the G20, obviously, particularly given the role that I have here as ambassador of Italy to Australia, I'm very happy to be able now to work with the Australian counterparts, be it within the working groups or the engagement groups. So I think there we can do all together a very good job in order to advance the global agenda that can be summarized, if you want, in the motto of our presidency: people, planet, and prosperity. So they are very much interlinked, as you know.
Last year, the EU unveiled, and you referred to the recovery package, the 750 billion euro recovery package for the global pandemic. And, that took spending from the EU around the pandemic into the trillions of euros. I'm just wondering, how you see Italy contributing to this European-wide and global response to the pandemic. It seems clear from your remarks so far that there is a strong conception of this as obviously a global challenge requiring a global response.
Yes, definitely. Our contribution, I think, dates back, and this is a point that I really want to stress, during the negotiation phases, because you remember at the beginning was not that easy to move forward with the right instruments and tools. And this is normal for an organization like the European Union, 27 governments with their own ideas and priorities. And in those negotiations, my country was really instrumental to make sure that the response was ambitious enough, including through new instruments that were never used before, like those related to supporting the unemployment people and so on. That's the past. Now the present is to really, it's up now to the governments, to the states, to be up to the expectations and produce plans that are ambitious enough in terms of reforming efforts. Because the idea behind the next generation EU, you want to call it like this is my preferred way to call it, preferable way to call it, but mostly known as recovery plan, is just to rebuild better, and rebuild better means not rebuild as it was before. So really a huge efforts in implementing the necessary reforms, be it economic, on climate change, on finance, on the digital agenda, etc., for which the European Union has put now at our disposals a considerable amount of money. So all governments are now working on their national recovery and reconstruction plans.
Ambassador, we're going to come to many of those topics, and certainly prior to COVID-19, climate change had been top of the political agenda across Europe, with now some debate, claims and counterclaims about the impact of COVID-19 on the possibilities of achieving a climate-neutral EU. The EC president has recently made the claim that the EU is on track to be carbon neutral by 2050. Can you tell us something about the actions that Italy has been undertaking to contribute to that climate change ambition?
Yes, of course. Here I have to make a reference to 2019, first of all, because already 2 years ago now, the European Union launched the Green Deal that, as you know, preceded the COVID and also the Next Generation EU. So already in December 2019, the path was very clearly indicated. Then, Europe has to work to make sure that the necessary measures are taken in order to achieve a greener way of living in general terms. And each own country has its own homeworks to do, clearly. So, coming back to your question, what is Italy doing? We are sticking definitely to the overarching Agenda 2030, because we have to remember that everything is very much linked and coherent to the call for change that comes, first of all, to the United Nations. And so in that context, we have already achieved the targets set for 2020, and we are, as a country, on track in certain objectives more, in other less, if you want, but we are rather on track when it comes to the achievement of the objectives for 2030. Then there is the overall...
2030, that's the reduction of the emission by 55%.
Exactly, by 55%. Yeah. So as a country, we are not doing that bad in that respect. Yes. Actually, we are on track because we do really invest a lot in renewable energy for many different reasons, including the fact that Italy is not a country that rich in terms of, fossil combustible. So it's for us a natural choice, if you want. So on that perspective, I'm not that concerned that Italy and the European Union is not on track. On the contrary, clearly the pandemic has posed a challenge to everyone. But in terms of if you want awareness raising of the links between situations such as this pandemic and the challenges on biodiversity and the effects of the climate change, be it extreme weather or whatever, well, I think that the pandemic has introduced also into the public more awareness about the fact that there is an interlink. Those aspects are so much intertwined. And then after that, moving from the Green Deal to Next Generation EU, which means a huge transformation of all our economies. And for this transformation, as I said, the European Union has put forward a significant amount of money. Well, it should facilitate that Europe remains on track. Mm-hmm. I want also, however, to remember that all in all, European Union is responsible, if we want to call it this way, of 9% of the dangerous emission, 9% all over the world. So it is very important that we stick to the plan, and we also lead by examples, and Europe is ready for that and committed. But it's equally important to have the engagement and the commitment of all other stakeholders. And in this respect, I really welcome very much personally, and I join my personal welcoming to the more, international remarks that have been done on this, namely the decision by the American administration to come back into the United Nations Framework Conference of Climate Change, and I think this will be a great stimulus to the international community as a whole to do more, because we have to be very clear and listen to the scientists. We don't have time. It's
a very important shift. Ambassador, alongside climate change, mobility is another key issue that people feel strongly about. And of course, freedom of movement has been absolutely the cornerstone of EU citizenship, from the Maastricht Treaty through to the Treaty of Rome. And again, COVID-19, as a public health emergency, has created all sorts of concerns and issues around mobility rights. Can you say something about that? And do you think that any additional action may be necessary from the EU to ensure that this fundamental right of EU citizenship is protected in the future?
Yeah, definitely it's one of the pillars of the European Union, and we have seen this very clearly, including in the negotiations that led to the Brexit. So, but here I think we have to be very clear. Health comes first. So the limitations, if you want, to mobility that have been introduced in common agreement among the 27 have been taken in response to an unprecedented situation. And also internally, each individual country has taken similar measures. Just to give you an example of my country, very recently, inter-regional travels were recently reduced. This is not, in order to limit forever the freedom of movement of population across countries and across Europe mostly, but it's just a contingency measure that was necessary, as many others, to contain as much as possible this devastating pandemic. But I'm pretty sure that immediately after, as soon as possible, when the pandemic is over or under control, the situation concerning the mobility, people mobility in Europe will resume exactly as it was. And you have a very clear example in what happened during the summer break, for example. After the first wave of pandemic was contained, countries of European Union really reopened the borders among themselves, allowing people to travel freely. So definitely this is, a special situation responding to an unprecedented challenges, and not something that would influence the attitude or the position or the policy of European Union and European Union member states concerning the freedom of movement of people.
The digital revolution has been a fundamental driver of change in the world. And again, the pandemic has arguably radically accelerated processes of digitalisation. Some critics are saying, in the same way that we have claims for a kind of climate emergency, perhaps there's now a digital emergency. We've seen many countries, populations around the world working remotely, teleworking, and so on and so forth. Of course, a lot of the policy around the digitalisation has centred on issues of governance and regulation. But now there are kind of, various concerns and issues around are new technologies up to the challenges that societies and communities face. The debate's really broad-ranging across Europe, ranging all the way from issues about the shift from 4G networks to 5G networks through to new developments in artificial intelligence, which I know is something that the Italian government has been very strongly focused on. Again, your reflections around this really crucial area of development.
Yeah, definitely the digitalization or the digital revolution or evolution is one element nowadays. It's undoubtedly one element of the future shape that our society will take, future and present, I would say, because this discussion has not started with the pandemic. It started much earlier, including in particular on topics such as granting access to internet, for example, yes, to least development countries, to reduce inequality. That is also another important area of work within the multilateral fora. Clearly, the pandemic has shown that we all collectively need perhaps to speed up on that. And we've been forced, in a way, to make better use or more frequent use of available technologies. And this is perhaps maybe only one of the positive aspects or heritage that we will retain from the pandemic. That's for sure. That said, it's a very complicated topic, and you alluded to it already. So there is the issue of governance, of privacy, of security, and free access and secure type of access. So the G5 technology is certainly one of it, and in Europe and including in Italy, therefore, work is ongoing to ensure the transition from the G4 technology to the G5 technology within certain parameters. That includes clearly a close eye to the respect of privacy of our citizen. In our society, this is still very important, luckily, but also that ensures the right level of security. That said, there are a lot of investment behind this new technology and these areas of science. And for example, let me pick up the space industry. That is an interesting example because Australia is investing a lot too, and there space industry can do a lot in order to ensure secure type of network that could enable, as an enabler of the digital evolution or revolution. And Italy, with its own space agency, within on a national basis, but also within the broader efforts of the European Union Space Agency, is doing a lot on that, and is also cooperating very well with the Australian Space Agency, despite the fact that ASA has been created just 2 years ago, but there is already a lot ongoing, including on nanosatellites, new technology that could really work very well as enablers of the transition technology. Then there is the cyber aspect, the cyber warfare sort of aspect. Or cyber attack or cyber crime. This is also another area that we have to keep very, very high on our agenda in order to ensure that, yes, the digitalization become a vector for development, possibly in a very democratic way, so inclusive, including towards countries that maybe don't possess the means to develop themselves those technology, but also in a manner that protects other fundamental interests of states and the international cooperation. And I'm referring to the security aspects, of course.
There is ongoing and renewed interest in the free trade agreement between Australia and the European Union, and perhaps against the backdrop of increased tariffs from China. The current Australian minister has indicated that he would very much like to see this agreement finalised in 2021. What are your thoughts about the significance of the agreement and the importance of this agreement from also the standpoint of Italy?
Definitely, we do put a lot of hope. We have a lot of hope to finalize the negotiations as soon as possible. And Italy is really one of the driving force of these efforts. But you know very well that this is a topic that is dealt with at 27. So negotiations are carried on behalf of all of us by the European Union. The next round of negotiations will take place, if I'm not wrong, in the first 2 weeks of March. So even during the pandemic, the negotiations and the talks never stopped. Of course, it was not possible to conduct negotiations round in person, but they did continue. And this is a demonstration that both parties do attach a lot of importance to the finalization of the agreement as soon as possible. And we do see it, obviously, in the broader framework of all free trade agreements and all cooperation agreements where Italy is an important driver, but also Australia. Australia has put in place a fantastic network of commercial and cooperation agreements within the Indo-Pacific. So we see this interest vis-à-vis Europe as part of, the global efforts. And here I think we are very much like-minded as countries, Italy and Australia, but also as groups, European Union and Australia, very much like-minded in protecting freedom of commerce, freedom of trade, which is an important element of the equation of all topics that we have been discussing so far. So if you ask me specifically about the timing, end of this year, I don't have the crystal ball. I don't know. What I know is that the negotiations are going on very aggressively, in good faith and with strong commitment of both parties. It's an ambitious free trade agreement, and rightly so, but precisely for this, there are still areas that do require a bit of additional work. But the sooner the better, for sure, for all of us.
Ambassador, in the final part of our discussion, I'd like to shift focus centrally to Australia and your work in Australia and the work that you do with your colleagues at the Italian Embassy. Can you tell us something about the nature of the diversity and range of Italian communities in Australia and the work that you're doing through the embassy as you support those communities?
Thank you for that question, because it gives me the opportunity to underline the strong Italian heritage, sort of. So the strong contribution that the Italian immigration provided to Australia as it is nowadays throughout more than 1 century. We have here in Australia over 1 million of Australians of Italian origin. That of course they are Australians, but still bring a lot of their Italy in their heart. On top of that, there are over 200,000 Italians working here, what we call, the new mobility. And this is a huge work for the Italian system. And I refer to the Italian system for a specific reason here, because obviously there is the embassy Embassy of Australia based in Canberra, but Italy has put in place a big effort in order to be present throughout and across Australia. Yeah. Australia is a continent, is a state, but it's a continent. So we do have 5 consulates here, 2 consulates general, respectively in Melbourne and Sydney, where the biggest community reside, a consulate in Perth, and one in Melbourne, in Brisbane, and another in Adelaide. So the diplomatic consular network is very extended, and this is really helpful in order to provide the necessary services to the community, but also in order to help the embassy to be present and ready to support the development of our social, cultural, trade ties that are already very strong, but there are still a lot of possibility that we want to exploit more. So you can see that Italy is really here with a very big, I would say, network. On top of the diplomatic consular network, we do have also a trade agency, 2 cultural institutes, a tourist board, so the entire Sistema Italia is here, including obviously chambers of commerce. So I think we are very well positioned in order to make sure that, at least make sure maybe to do our part in order to bring forward even more the excellent cooperation that do exist already between Italy and Australia. And I would like to see very soon developments, including in the political field, for example, a strategic dialogue be implemented as soon as possible. Definitely the pandemic did not help very much in that regard, because traveling was not an option and is still not an option. But I have to say that I've seen a lot of contacts at top leadership level, including through the new technology that we mentioned before. Right. So I think that all ingredients are there for an even brighter future of friendship and cooperation between Italy and Australia. At least this is my wish, my hope, and I will do what I can in order to achieve this.
Ambassador Tardioli, thank you very much for joining us on Europe Now.
Thank you very much for inviting me. Thank you for this opportunity.